Hi everyone, my name is Melissa Brown and I'm here to talk to you about generalizations and hasty generalizations. So let's get right into it. What is a generalization? Generalization is the process of moving from specific observations about some individuals within a group to general claims about members of the group. Another way that we can look at it is generalizations is the process of moving from specific observations about X to general claims about X. And we can use this in an example. So generalization is the process of moving from specific observations about dogs or a specific breed of dogs to general claims about all dogs. So things that you should know. Generalization by definition is an incomplete survey of evidence according to Groke and Tyndall. Sometimes the end result of a generalization is a claim. That claim can either be general, universal, or proportional. So general claims typically have a statement that sound like X's are Y's. Universal claims have a more stronger position that would say all X's are Y's. And then proportional claims assess the subset of X's to determine the proportionality of X's are to Y's. So, and if they are to satisfaction. So in meeting that set of standard, but maybe take into consideration the sample error or defect. And that would say majority of X's or Y's. So here we have a scheme. S is a sample of X's. Proportion 1 of X's, the samples are Y. Proportion 2 of all X's are Y. What does all that mean? As quotes from Groke and Tyndall often we make generalizations that rely on anecdotal evidence, and that means that without a sample, which consists of informal reports of incidents that have not been subject to careful scrutiny. So that's important to remember. A good example was provided by Professor Carosa on the Moodle, who made reference to stereotypes as a type of generalization. We often stereotype in the absence of suitable sample size based on a single experience or an impression from sources such as media, and this is how anecdotal evidence comes into play. Generalizations based on anecdotal evidence is very likely to have bias. These generalizations are weak and are therefore considered fallacies, but we'll get into that. In terms of looking at the strength of a generalization, you should consider the sample size. And so with the sample size, you want to be careful to make sure the sample is not too small so that and if it is, then it is likely to be unreliable and sample bias. Ideally, your sample should be large enough that the characteristics are not due to chance, according to Groke and Tyndall. And they remind us that a good sample avoids bias. So let's actually take an example that you see here. So we have President Donald Trump. In June of 2015, when he was announcing his intention of running for presidency, made the following statement at one of his rallies. When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists. So when we look at the scheme that S is sample of X, proportion 1 of X's, the samples are Y, proportion 2 of X's are Y. So his statement was, when Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists. So X is people from Mexico or Mexicans, Y is the property that X's are said to have, and S being the sample is the characteristics of the group that is being considered. So if we want to dissect this a little bit further, if X being Mexicans and Y is the property that X's are said to have, so that would be problematic. Basically, the Y is that they're sending people that have lots of problems. And then S is the sample, which is the characteristics of that group of people. So the characteristics being said in this statement is they're drug users, they're criminals, and they're rapists. So remember we talked about characteristics for a good generalization, having your sample size being appropriate and not having bias. So premise 1, S is a sample of X's. Premise 2, proportion 1 of X's in S or Y. And conclusion, proportion 2 of X's or Y. So let's diagram President Trump's statement. Premise 1 would be they're sending people that have lots of problems. So they're sending people that have lots of problems. Premise 2, they're bringing drugs. they're bringing crime and they're rapists, and Mexico is not sending their best as the conclusion. Based on this, would you say this is a strong argument, or would you say this is a weak argument that has faults? Just take a moment to think about it. I would definitely say, and I hope all of us have come to the same conclusion, but it's okay if we haven't, that this is not an example of a good generalization. Actually, this is an example of a fallacy, which we would categorize as a hasty fallacy. So in writing philosophy, Vaughan and McIntosh define a hasty fallacy as the drawing of a conclusion about a whole group or class of things based on inadequate sample of I'm going to start again.